I've hurt people to get my drugs. Like I've stolen cars or broken into houses.
A very deliberate blow by law enforcement has occurred this morning.
It's as simple as sending a text. That's what police are saying on the streets.
I would estimate 25 bags.
This is dealer cocaine. This is what this is.
So in recent weeks, there's been some major cocaine seizures here in New South Wales, up in Newcastle. I think they've got about 60 odd kilos, which was linked to another bigger importation that was bound for here from Indonesia, wasn't it?
Yeah, so police have, and this is kind of how this started for us, wasn't it? With police telling us about some of their efforts that they have done to take cocaine off the streets. And there was a diver late last month who was set to bring in, they were trying to bring in some cocaine that had come from, obviously from South America initially, but through Indonesia. And when it reached the port of Newcastle, it was attached to the bottom of a massive container ship, and he went down to get it. And at some point has had a bit of an incident and ended up drowning. But that cocaine matched with cocaine that was also found floating in the ocean off the coast of Indonesia and seized by Indonesian authorities.
That was quite a really large amount, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. That was a couple hundred kilos that they found there, and there was 60 kilos here in New South Wales that they've seized. Police are still trying to work out how much actually got into New South Wales, but that port of Newcastle has for a long time been on their radar. There's probably a bit of a lack of security and a lack of a focus on that port, and drug syndicates had seized on that and had been moving their gear in through Newcastle. And from that, from Newcastle, they can pretty much get straight into Sydney Harbour.
And it's soon after that, there was also another seizure of over 300 found off the WA, a guy in a camper van in the Pilbara, which they believe came in through Port Hedland. That's another 320 kilos of coke. The driver of the camper van was a New South Welshman, so as you would many believe it was destined for the East Coast. Now, I've been told that wasn't just one syndicate gear. It seems like a couple of groups had got together. So those seizures have meant that, there's talk on Sydney streets particularly about a shortage, that it's a little bit harder to get. The quality of the cocaine going around seems to have dropped. And again, I know it sounds strange, but the gram is no longer a gram and hasn't been for a longer time, and it keeps shrinking. So a baggie used to be a gram, from what I understand. I'm not really that familiar with all of that, but from what I can gather, you get a baggie now and it keeps shrinking, and the price stays the same.
Yeah.
But you're getting less, so that actually means it's costing more.
And these syndicates, as you just mentioned, that there was a couple of them bringing in, and they normally, on a big shipment, have specific, if you've got a big half a tonne or tonne of cocaine, whatever kind of size that they're bringing it in, the blocks themselves have different stamps on them, don't they?
That's right, yeah. And that identifies for what group it was destined to go for what, bikie gang or what distribution. So in Sydney, the southwest, there will be, if it's going to be distributed by Hells Angels, whatever,
Yep.
They all have an individual stamp, and from there, that's who it goes to, and that's how they collect it, and then it's distributed. So, and as I said, I'd heard that there was a number had put in, it kicked in. It's like buying in bulk. You get together,
yeah,
and you buy a large amount. So it's not. We hear these massive seizures, and you think, gee, someone's lost a lot of coke. Invariably, it'll be 2 or 3 or 4 different groups.
Yeah, totally.
Have lost it.
And the impact of that on the street is that, and it kind of comes off the back of COVID, where obviously borders were a bit were a lot harder to get through. So we've had COVID. We've then had police with these major seizures, and then the arrests in recent weeks of some of the leaders of these dealer syndicates, which is the most
particularly in Sydney, it's hit, hasn't it?
Particularly in Sydney, these dealer syndicates, which are the most common way for people these days to get cocaine, simply sending a text to somebody who meets them outside their house, outside a pub, wherever they are, takes them on the lap of the block. There's a transaction. They get out and go about their night, and the dealer goes on to the next customer. So police have kind of been looking at targeting this from different directions, and we've seen the seizures of big scales of drugs, and now they're cracking down on these low-level dealers particularly linked to the Alamein crime network, who
Here in Sydney particularly,
who we talk about a lot, who have had quite a monopoly with their links to the Comanchero, a monopoly over the drug distribution through Western and Southwestern Sydney.
Yeah. And another little interesting fact I've heard is also the price of the dollar actually affects the price of cocaine. When you're talking about those massive amount of shipments, so when the dollar, Australian dollar goes down, the price of cocaine will go up. Now, at the moment, the fluctuations aren't that small, but a law enforcement guy, 40 years experience, said to me, he said, when you have big fluctuations, he said, you'll see that reflected in the price of cocaine.
Yeah.
Which is it's just like any other commodity. And at the moment, we're seeing, the industry's been hit hard. It was hit hard for a year or two there by those big busts by the federal police with the NOM. And there were big seizures being done. So now whether the cartels and the distributors are now breaking up and not doing those massive big shipments that they used to, because we saw that happen particularly with dope growing. It used to be massive plantations, but when they were caught, they were losing their entire crop. So now you'll see, particularly in wherever it's been grown, especially in northern New South Wales, they have smaller little plots of marijuana or of whatever they're growing, so as to reduce the risk when one's discovered. And it's very similar with some of these importations, Occasionally they get greedy and try and go for one big hit, but I think they've probably reduced the size after a NOM, and maybe until they grow in confidence that their access is back to where it used to be.
But the one thing we do know is that they won't be stopping bringing cocaine into Australia anytime soon, because there's a demand for it, but also we pay some of the highest prices in the world for it. So it's so lucrative from, when it comes out of the plant in Colombia to what it's worth when it's being sold, in a little bag on the streets of Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, anywhere else around the country, east or west coast.
Yeah. That's why we're being targeted, it's not just like expats and bikie gangs bringing it in here. We actually know the Armenians. There's a big Armenian influence here in Sydney, who get a lot of their gear from LA, Armenian mafia over there. We've got the Mexicans, so there'll be all sorts of groups bringing it into Australia, because we have this, as you said, we pay top dollar, and we just seem to consume it, like the massive amount of customers here willing to pay good money for it. So, and it's not going to stop. So.